We are 2 weeks from game week in the FCS, and it's time for some FCS 101. Once again, it is the Missouri Valley Football Conference and the state of Montana, specifically the Dakotas and Montana, even without North Dakota State, that are the usual suspects and the prime national championship contenders. The Big Sky and MVFC comprised of 4 of the top 5, 7 of the top 10, 8 of the top 12 in the STATS Perform top 25 preseason poll. Not that those ever mattered, but not that anyone would probably be arguing any of this. The top 2 teams are Montana State, the defending national champion, and Montana right behind them at number 3, South Dakota State, just ahead of that team that beat the Bison last year in their final ever FCS game and should have won the national title. Came within inches of doing so in that game against Montana State. That'd be Illinois State. So that's our backdrop, and we're going to slice into it with a guy who's becoming one of our favorites here at Happy Hour. He's living and working in Missoula, Montana, where he played for the Griz, and he now has his own show. It's called the Samuel Akem Show, and it'll start on YouTube 1 hour a day on Monday. So we're happy to warm him up. Samuel Akem, former Griz receiver. Good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, man. I'm good, man. It's been this last July month has been really, really busy. Big Sky Media Days was a couple of weeks ago. I was in Great Falls. We were in Seattle this past weekend. I mean, I've been running and gunning, but I'm feeling good. Football season is starting, and it's an exciting time of year.
Sure is. You've been to 3 Griz practices, so we will lock in on them, and them being at number 2 shouldn't be a surprise because they have so much weaponry back. But when you look at, first of all, just the top 5, whether we're going off of last year, more so, of course, who's returning this year, and quarterback has always weighed most heavily.
Yes.
Montana State won all 57 first-place votes. Montana 2. South Dakota State 3, Illinois State 4. By the way, UC Davis in the Big Sky coming in at 6 behind Tarleton State. But does that all seem right to you, especially those top 4?
I would have Illinois State, Tarleton State a little lower just because of the point that you made, the quarterback position. I'm very pro experienced quarterback. I think the best teams in FCS football have experienced quarterbacks, with Illinois State losing Tommy Rittenhouse and with Tarleton State losing Victor Gabales. I think they're both going to be good teams. I mean, I have higher hopes for Tarleton State than I do Illinois State, but I think they're both going to be good. I just don't know how good, and I know it's going to be heavily dependent on who is running things at that quarterback position. So I would probably have them a little lower, put UC Davis, Rhode Island a little higher. And maybe, I'm not as high on UC Davis either, but I am very familiar with the weapons that UC Davis has. And I have spent a ton of time talking with Coach Tim Plow, the head coach at UC Davis. So I understand the system that he runs. And, I have a lot of faith in all of the pieces around UC Davis. The only piece, in my opinion, they're missing is that quarterback position. For Tarleton State and Illinois State, I have more questions than I do answers right now.
Okay. Would you elevate Youngstown State a little higher than 9 because, the Walter Payton Award winner is back at quarterback, Bo Brungard?
No, I'm a big fan of Bo, and I think he's immensely talented. Obviously, that's why he's the defending Walter Payton Award winner. But it's a little different for him. He is the returning quarterback, but where are all the weapons for him? He lost Max Tomczak. He's losing. I don't know what the running back position looks like there. But then defensively, they got the new defensive coordinator from Mercyhurst, who, I think will be able to do a decent job. That first game of the season for them is going to be very exciting since they play Mercyhurst. But I don't know, still question marks around weaponry for Bo Brungard. Although I think, I'm a strong believer that, you don't need high-level 4-star, or you're not getting 4 stars at the FCS, but like 3-star, 4-star talent at the FCS around Bo Brungard. You just need some guys who are capable, and Bo Brungard will get the job done.
Yeah.
And I think they're right where they should be.
Okay. North Dakota comes in at 10. USD comes in at 12. USD finished sole second in the Mo Valley last year ahead of Illinois State, and Youngstown State, but they lost their quarterback. They lost Aiden Bauman. So that's all... that's all incredibly
I would have North Dakota
interesting.
A little higher, to be honest.
Okay.
I would probably have them in my top 8 just because Jerry Kaminsky is phenomenal. He's good. I'm not going to say phenomenal, actually, and that's not an indictment against him. He just has a lot to grow, and I hope he takes that next step this season. But I think Jerry Kaminsky's going to have a good year. But think about what they did defensively against the SoCon, Big South SoCon champ in Tennessee Tech. I mean, Lance Rucker absolutely wrecked that game. Lance Rucker's a Buck Buchanan Award watch list guy. And I think defensively, North Dakota is going to be very good. I think they were pretty decent last year, but I think they're going to be led by their defense this year. And I think if Jerry Kaminsky can kind of, take care of the ball a little better, and take another step in the right direction, I think North Dakota can certainly be a quarterfinal or the semifinal team this season.
Yeah, and then we're going to really dig into the big three here, Montana, Montana State, and SDSU in a moment. But what about USD? By now, the Coyotes are kind of used to both in the state and in the Valley, and therefore nationwide, being somehow, some way overlooked in some capacity every year. They love this tout 3 straight quarterfinal bursts. They're the only team in the country that can do that, but they also haven't reached the national title game. They've had one semifinal, and that was, of course, a couple years ago against Montana State, where they lost by a couple touchdowns. But they don't have Aiden Bauman, and they don't have their offensive line. None. Zero returning offensive linemen. They do have a guy that, could be the nation's rushing leader this year.
Mr. Pierre.
Yeah. What do you think about the Yotes?
I'm high on Charles Pierre, but just like you mentioned, Aiden Bauman, I actually talked about this on my show yesterday or today. It dropped today. But, Aiden Bauman wasn't going to wow you with his arm. He wasn't going to wow you with, his intellect on the field, but he just wasn't going to beat himself. He wasn't going to be the reason why you lost the game. And losing a guy like that is troublesome. Now, I saw the report from Matt Zimmer, about Austin Madrewski potentially kind of taking lead of that job. I know they got some other seniors and some other freshmen fighting for that job, but that's obviously a very, very important job, given that they're a top, what are they at right now? Top 15 team right now in the country at 12. So I just don't know what to think about South Dakota. I really don't. That quarterback position, like we've mentioned with some of the other teams, is going to be important. And then that offensive line. I mean, who's the running back they had this past season? I'm blanking on his name. Help me out.
It was LJ Phillips, and he's now going to be the presumable backup at Iowa.
Okay. LJ Phillips, what did he rush for? Like 1,800?
Yeah, 1,740, something like that.
And you're losing that offensive line that he ran behind? I mean, I don't know, John. That's a tall task, especially what is the experience level of the guys that are going to be replacing on the offensive line? Another thing that you didn't mention is, which maybe this will play a part, maybe this won't. Their head coach left for Rutgers. Now they got the new offensive coordinator quarterbacks coach becoming the new head coach. Is it Vism?
Yep, Vism.
So I don't know. There's once again with South Dakota, I feel like I have more questions than I do answers right now with their squad.
That's extremely fair. And, we're going to get a chance here on Happy Hour on Wednesday to go to Brookings to talk to Dan Jackson and a bunch of players. And in some form, we'll be also checking in deeply with the Coyotes probably the week after this week. But let's, first of all, before we get to Montana, since this is a South Dakota show, your feeling on the Jackrabbits. 9-5 last year, didn't reach the quarterfinals. And in fact, back-to-back weeks, South Dakota teams went to Missoula to die and die hard. Die hard. Both scores were maybe a tad deceiving, but still the Grizzlies hung about a half 100 on both the Jackrabbits and then the Yotes in back-to-back weeks. And so SDSU, though, still they get number 3 billing. How do you feel about that?
I would actually put them at number 2. I see them as the biggest threat to the Bobcats this season. I'm very high on Montana. I think Montana's going to be good. I still have questions about the defense. But when I look at the rest of the field and I think about the talent that they not only have returning, but some of the guys that they brought in, like the running back that they brought in from Northeastern, rushed for 1,500 yards at Northeastern, albeit D2, still a very productive player. Maybe I'm high on his rushing yards. He might be a little lower than that, but he's a very productive running back coming from the D2. And then Chase Mason, hopefully he gets a full healthy season under his belt. The receivers on the outside, you got Graham Goering and Lofton Ogroski. On the defensive side, I saw the Wayne State transfer. He looks absolutely phenomenal. Put him along with all the other guys they already have on that defense. I mean, it seems like the makings of a team that is built offensively, defensively. We'll see what the special teams looks like. But I don't know. It's hard to find holes on the South Dakota State squad right now. I'm just troubled. And I've had them as my number 2 team, all the way up till a decent couple of weeks after the season, I was kind of set that, they're going to be the number 2 team this year coming into the season.
Yeah. How do you weigh Chase Mason against the other top returning quarterbacks? Justin Lamson from Montana State. Of course, you have, and give me some help here, Keali'i Ayat.
Yes, sir.
At Montana. 69% of completion percentage, over 4,000 yards, 41 touchdowns for him last year. We've mentioned Kaminsky at UND, run guard, the Walter Payton Award winner. He's back. How do you weigh both skill set and just overall body of work, expectations, Chase Mason against the others?
I think the skill set is there. He can run the ball. He's a big physical quarterback. I remember seeing him in the press conference after the game in Missoula last winter, and man, he is built, and he is a unit for sure. So I think physically he's got all the traits. The numbers aren't necessarily there for me, and I would honestly have him below all the top guys. I would even have him right now below Devin Farrell. I would have him below Ty Pennington, and that's not an indictment against his talent or anything, because he's immensely talented, and I think he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I just need to see it. Now, obviously, he was limited last year due to the injury that he dealt with. So you take that into account. I believe as a starter, what was he, 8-1 last season? Very, very solid as a starter. So he's dependable, and I know that. But the numbers for me kind of fall short. And obviously, too, albeit, they were a battered team when they got into the playoffs, he did lose, on the road. So we'll see how he does this year, but I'm very high on him as a player. But if I had to rank him, he'd probably be near the bottom of my top 10.
Oh, of your how many?
Top 10.
Top 10. Okay.
Yes.
What is it? Is it purely numbers, or is it other things you see, specific situations or skill sets that put him that low on your radar right now? Or is it just lack of experience, only 9 games?
Maybe a little bit of lack of experience. I think also the numbers are heavily in there for me as well. Just looking at the numbers, when I compare him to some of the other guys who did play full seasons, his numbers don't stack up as well as some of the other guys. And given his limited sample size, I just don't feel like I have enough data points when I'm measuring him against some of the other guys. I don't feel like I can put him above certain guys right now. But that certainly could change.
Okay. You made an interesting mention about how you see SDSU, though, overall, they're your number 2 to Montana State, and Montana, who is the stats number 2, as number 3. We're splitting hairs here. All 3 are really good, and right now Montana State's a clear, decisive preseason number 1, all 57 first-place votes. But give me a little bit more about Montana and why you see SDSU a little bit more of a contender before the season starts than your own alma mater.
Well, there is some, what do I want to say? There's some other data on this that makes this point, that kind of makes this point. But what was the only FCS team that beat Montana State last year? Albeit early on in the season when both teams were fully healthy, and Justin Lamson's early on in his career, they hadn't necessarily got the things under their belt. But What was that team?
Well, it was the Jackrabbits.
It was the Jackrabbits.
Good job,
and who had 2 opportunities to beat Montana State in 2025 and wasn't able to get the job done?
Well, the Griz lost by a field goal at home in the finale of the regular season in November, and then 48-23 in the semifinals in Bozeman in December.
Now, are the teams going to be exactly the same as they were last year? No. But South Dakota State is returning a ton of players that were on that team, and I don't know. You take that, and I take that into account. They were the only team that beat Montana State last year, and they were returning a ton of talent from that team, as well as Montana State is. I don't know. That means something to me. Also, Montana was given an opportunity at home, couldn't get it done. Montana was given an opportunity on the road and couldn't get it done. That matters to me as well. But also, just looking at the makeup of both teams, I've been talking about question marks that I have for these teams. I have a few more questions about Montana's defense than I do about South Dakota State's defense. So that is one of the biggest reasons why I have them above Montana.
Right now. That was kind of the thing last year. I just remember sizing up these games against the Jacks and then the Yotes. And in both cases, that was the case against Montana. Was just, boy, they do enough to get it done. And they did 13 out of 15 times, only 2 losses. Were to the national champion Montana State, but they were scoring 45, 50 points a game, and indicative of their last. First of all, they lose 48-23. That was their last game. 52-22 over USD, 50-29 over SDSU, and that game was kind of back and forth sort of shootout for the first half. What is it about Montana's defense? Why wasn't it quite up to national championship standard last year? And what should be better or slightly worse about it this year?
I don't know. I can never really put my finger on why they're missing. And I think the biggest reason for that is because maybe, I'm not in those meeting rooms. So, I don't really get to hear some of the talking points that the coaches are giving to the kids. But one thing I did hear from Solomon Tuliapupu in the first week after in one of the press conferences, he mentioned that gap was a bad word. And I know that's like a universal term in defense is being gap sound, working in gaps. This is your gap. You are responsible for this gap, this gap, this gap. That's like a defensive term. And for some reason in the 3-3-5 that they ran previously, that was something that was kind of shunned using that word. And I guess they had another term for it. I don't know. But it seemed just like, I don't know. That seemed like a big thing to me because when I watched the Montana State game back and you see the play on 3rd and 20 that Justin Lamson completes to Taco Dowler down the field, it seems like Montana's defense gets out of their gaps. And, if they were a little bit more gap sound, maybe Justin Lamson doesn't scramble up and make that throw. I don't know. And in terms of what they have coming in with Eric Sanders from Eastern Washington, I'm hesitant to say that they're going to be great because, he wasn't great at Eastern Washington. Now, a lot of people want to point out the fact that, he did coach in the NFL and he has experience at the FBS level and all these things. And that's very fair, but what have you done for me lately? That's the biggest thing. And I'm not trying to be hard on this guy because we did talk to Coach Bobby Kennedy and he mentioned that he's heard the comments that I made about their defensive coordinator as well. But I just have to go off what I've seen. Now, maybe he didn't have as much talent at Eastern Washington that he will at Montana. I think they're immensely talented on the defensive side of things. But being talented, Montana's defense was talented last year, and they still gave up 25 to 30 points a game. I mean, that's not going to get it done. So they are looking at doing more 4 down this year. 2 linebackers on the field, an edge rusher is standing up in a buck position. They still got 5 defensive backs on the field. I think they're changing up some things. They will still be in 3 down. I don't know. My biggest thing is I'm going to have to see it first to really give some broad thoughts about it.
Well, hey, and the fact of the matter is new scheme, new defensive coordinator. You mentioned him, Eric Sanders, and a bunch of new players and a lot of new transfers.
Yep.
But the true fact is that Montana didn't need a great defense to win every game it played last year, except against the national champion twice, because they had such a dynamic offense. And you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country returning. I've mentioned Ayat, 69%, 4,070 yards, 41 touchdowns. First returning starting quarterback since Dalton Snead in 2019, I believe.
He was my quarterback.
That's right. I figured it was. And then you've got one of the best running backs, Eli Gilman, has returned. So, it's a loaded question, but how loaded is this Montana offense?
Extremely loaded. One young player you didn't even mention was Brooks Davis, went for 698, so basically 700 yards last year, was a freshman All-American on FCS Football Central. He's a phenomenal player. He's also returning. And, I mean, just the quarterback position alone, a guy who led the FCS in passing yards, I think that is so crucial. A guy who has experience, a guy who's comfortable in his own skin, comfortable in the offense, has the same OC coming back. Actually, this OC coached Ayat's father as well at Montana. So, I mean, there's a lot of continuity on the offense. And when everybody's kind of comfortable with what's going on, everybody's comfortable with the calls, I think that leads to a lot of success offensively. But they're extremely loaded.
And you have a new head coach. We kind of buried that lead in Bobby Kennedy. He was the receivers coach. This is a first-time head coach. We talked about him when he took over. It seemed like a surprise. Bobby Houck's retiring, and then the next week he's the defensive coordinator.
It's the last time I talked to you.
That's right. By the way, just out of curiosity, how did a lot of Griz fans feel about that? He. By the way, I remember every word. I don't remember everything he said verbatim, but I took copious notes in his retirement press conference. He did not close the door on retiring from football, just as a head coach, and now he's a.
He said he never wants to coach again.
Ten.
Head coach again. He never wants to be a head coach again.
Head coach, yeah. For all the headaches head coaches get these days, NIL, transfer portal, blah blah blah. Especially if you're an FCS head coach. But how did Griz fans take to both Bobby leaving and then a week later reappearing as a Big Ten DC, and also the hire of Bobby Kennedy?
I think people are okay with it. You know, on the Bobby Hawks side of things, I think people were kind of just understanding. I think as the weeks have gone on, as the months have gone on, you kind of start to look at, like, I was going through Bobby Kennedy's contract structure, and in his contract, it says, you know, there's a buyout unless retirement, and the word retirement, you know, that's why he retired, so that the buyout number was different. I did a video on it. You can go back and look at that. But yeah, so that is one, helps me kind of understand, you know, kind of the thinking behind Houck's retirement is, you know, the language in the contract and, you know, what money would be owed and things like that. But on the Bobby Kennedy thing, I think fans are fine. To finish my point about Bobby Houck and how fans feel about it, I feel like people feel fine. You know, I think there was a sentiment, at least this was my sentiment, that I thought Bobby Houck could stay, but I thought he would need to make some changes in order to stay at Montana. And with staying at Montana, I just didn't think that he was like, Houck is at that age where I don't think he's really willing to change. You know, I am who I am. He's even told us that when I was at Montana in meetings, we are who we are. Us older coaches on this squad, we are who we are, which is okay. And I think people are appreciative and thankful for what Houck did, but I also think people are happy for a new age of Montana football. So on to Bobby Kennedy. I think fans have been it feels like it's been a breath of fresh air, you know, a breath of fresh air. He's been very open to the media. There's been a week into training camp, and almost every every position coach has talked to the media. Both coordinators have talked to the media.
Yeah.
Never let a coordinator or a position coach once speak to the media. We got to have Kali Ayat on our Deep Ball podcast with one of my former teammates, Keenan Curran. That would have never happened. I mean, there's been so much, and you know, the media isn't everything. Bobby Kennedy said he was going to prioritize recruiting the state better. He has done that. Think about this, John. They gave this guy a 3-year extension on top of the 1 year that he had. So he's got 4 years on his contract now before he's even coached a game. Why? Because he's locked in so many in-state recruits, because he's been on the GSA tour. The fans absolutely love him. The admin loves him. I mean, it just seems like it's a different environment with Griz football. And I think that's one of the reasons why the fans are really happy and why that contract extension was given out.
Have you noticed differences in just the way practices go from the 3 practices you've been? The operation of it?
That's one thing that's been kind of universal from all the people I've seen talk about the practices. It's been pretty similar to what Houck did in terms of the focus on special teams and even the structure of practice and things like that. That hasn't really changed much. But also, you know, given that this was a guy who had never really done this before and is coming into being a head coach from a position coach, you know, you can change some things, and obviously you want to change some things based on how you want to run a program, but also he's never done this before. So, you know, if there was a guy that is the most winningest coach in Big Sky history, I might want to copy some of the things that this guy did, and practice has been one of those things.
All right, Montana State, 3 hours away from you. Again, universal, unanimous, undisputed number 1 heading into the season. You usually give that nod to a national champion who returns a quarterback, returns a head coach. So, but give me your own words. What is it about Justin Lamson, and what are some other reasons why the Bobcats are a strong number 1 to start the year?
Man, if you watch Justin Lamson play, and, you know, I've watched the film on him, and he played his best ball when his best ball was needed. This is something that I noticed from Cam Miller during his career. Like, Cam Miller was a good quarterback, but when he played the South Dakota States, when he played the Montana States in the national championship, it just felt like he made every throw. He made every play. Think about that last minute. Well, they ended up actually losing this game against the Yotes. I think it was 2023. I can't remember exactly the year, 23 or 24. But when they went on that long, it was 24, I think, actually. They went on that long 8-minute drive and, you know, looked like they put the game out of reach against the Yotes. And then obviously they ended up going and scoring the game-winning touchdown in the last seconds.
Yep, 2024, yep.
He's just a winner, Justin Lamson. He's just a winner, and he knows how to win. Brent Vegan has put together a machine out there. Taco Dowler is returning. Adam Jones is returning. A ton of defensive talent returning on the defensive side of things. And, you know, they're very particular with how they go into the portal. We talked to Brent Vegan about this at Big Sky Media Days. You know, they are not just going to retool their entire roster to the portal. They like the developmental play. So we're going to recruit through high school. We're going to develop these guys within our program, and that's how we're going to recruit. And they brought in a tight end through the transfer portal. They brought in a corner through the transfer portal, and then they brought in another corner. So they brought in 2 corners and a tight end through the transfer portal. But that's really it. They are not super heavy into the portal, and it works for them, and they develop phenomenally. So I just think they're running a machine up there. I would honestly call them, I don't want to disrespect anybody, but I would call them NDSU light. I mean, the way they run the ball, the way they structure things, and it just seems very, very machine-like the way they've done things the last few years.
Well, and in the regular season, with the exception of Montana, one of the best offenses in the country, this was a defense against FCS competition that rarely gave up more than 14 points, if at all. So they have what Montana doesn't have, which is a stout defense.
Yeah.
And so Bobcats number one. There's a lot of individual situations here. I'm going to try to blanket something for you. You see Ayat at Montana, Lampson's coming back at Montana State, Mason at SDSU, these returning quarterbacks. According to those around Chase Mason and Dan Jackson, I believe them. At least $1 million. Could have gone and played 7 figures Big Ten SEC, but he wants to be in Brookings, and NFL scouts recommended that, hey, you can do it from there. You can do it from Brookings. You will get drafted in the NFL if you have a good year in the FCS. But it's kind of amazing. Bo Brungard at Youngstown as well, that all these guys are back. What kind of overtures do you think we'll just stay with quarterbacks that these guys have, and why are these are the best, and they're all back in the FCS?
We talked to a ton of coaches about this at the Big Sky Media Days. We all asked them about that because the Big Sky itself has like 3 or 4, maybe 5 returning quarterbacks or starting quarterbacks that were good. And it's just really good for the league. It's really good for the FCS. And I think at this point, these guys are starting to see that the grass is not greener. I think we have a healthy sample size of guys that have left and gone to see if they can play at the P5. And not that they can't. Like Mark Gronowski did phenomenal at Iowa. Like he wasn't a bad quarterback and he was a starter. But I think we have enough sample size to where Mark Gronowski is much less likely, and I'm blanking on his name he was from Idaho. He was an Idaho transfer, if I think of his name but guys like that. We have way more examples like that than we do of the Mark Gronowskis. And I think these guys are seeing legacy. They're seeing the love and fan support that they get. The NIL, whatever they have, is going to be geared towards making sure you're taken care of. It's not going to be near the level that you get at the FBS level, but you're going to be taken care of. You're not going to be looking for a meal or anything like that. So I think they just see all the writing on the wall from what has been, and they appreciate what they have.
2 more and we're out the door. We asked this a few months ago, but things move at the speed of light in college athletics now. How do Griz and Bobcat fans, alumni, media, whoever, what's the sense of desires for those schools to go FBS now that we've seen North Dakota State make the leap?
I don't think there's like necessarily a rush, but I think people are like, okay, they kind of expect it at this point. And I think, people are happy with where they're at, especially if, being at the top of the subdivision is where you're at. Like if you're going to compete for national championships, then let's do it. But if that opportunity to move up comes, I think Montana and Montana State fans would welcome that. I think at this point, Montana State fans have got their natty. They're like kind of ready to go. I think Montana fans are maybe, hey, let's try to get one more.
and unlike North Dakota State and Northern Illinois, 2 most recent entrants into the Mountain West, the Montana schools are in the mountains and they're in the West. So that would make some sense.
And they have to go together. So that's kind of what ties them together.
Very important point. Why are the Montanas and the Dakotas so dominant and expected to be dominant once again in the FCS?
I think some of it's history, that they've always been really good or they've always been near the top, at least for the Montana. I'm speaking of Montana, NDSU as well. I don't know so much about South Dakota State or Montana State, but I know that they've all been relatively good over their careers in the FCS. And I don't know. I just think when you think of FCS football, you think of Montana State. I think that seeps over into the players. I think that seeps over into the fans. I think that seeps over into the people who even watch these games. They know when they see a Montana State, a South Dakota State, a South Dakota, a North Dakota, when they see those names, they want to stay and watch because they know it's going to be good football, and they usually see those teams playing deep into the playoffs.
Does it feel bigger there? I mean, the stadiums, the crowds, is that part of it? It feels closer to FBS.
I've never actually been to Brookings, or I've actually never been to Fargo either, but I have been to the Alaris Dome, and I have been to Vermilion, and then obviously I've been to Bozeman and Missoula, and all are great venues, and the fans show up, they care, they cheer, the students show up, they care, they cheer, and it matters, and people want to play where football matters.
Sammy, this was great. We're off and running. Looking forward to your new show, the Samuel Akem Show. It's going to be on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts starting on Monday. You're going to talk a lot of Big Sky and FCS football and beyond. So thanks for, again, warming up with us today.
Appreciate you, John.
Cheers.